Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. So here's the presentation about ddev-gitpod, a full development environment in your browser. So my name is Ofer Shaal. I'm a senior developer at Phase 2. I'm also a Drupal core maintainer, and I co-created Drupal Rector, which help automation of code generation for Drupal upgrades. My latest gig is ddev-gitpod, and that's what this presentation is about. So if you have questions during, feel free to ask them. Hopefully we can cover everything. So I'll start with this one, which is welcome to the future. I really believe that this is where the whole world is moving towards, and more this will become the main tool that people are using whenever they want to develop things. So first of all, we're going to cover what is Gitpod and why is there even a need for something like Gitpod. So the issues that Gitpod comes to solve are a different situation where we work in a group, or maybe we work on Drupal and there's a whole community with lots of people that one person got the project working on their machine, but when we move it to someone else, it behaves differently. Then we have the setup time. How long does it take to get someone ready to go? Either it's a company you work for or your own company, and there's a code base and the database and the files, and you need it all together. And how long does that take? Getting everything compiled and ready and working. If you tried contributing to Drupal code, also that takes quite some time. If you've seen Dries' presentation about how long does it take to find where to contribute to Drupal, that takes a long time. He didn't even start touching upon, okay, once you figured out where it should happen, how long does that process take of getting your environment into a Drupal environment and then start looking at the problem you're trying to solve, solving it, and contributing it back. Another thing that I see often, and this helps me a lot, is I'm working on my project. A colleague might work on a different project, or maybe it is the same project I'm working on, but they're on a different branch. Especially on the same project, it becomes even more problematic. So while I'm on a branch and my database is in a certain state, I want to do some peer reviews. Now I need to switch the branch and save what I have somewhere and then go and do PR reviews. So there's a whole context switching cost of technically how long does it take to get a different branch now working on my machine while pausing what I was doing later on, getting back to that. So today, when you want to work on any project, there's usually a README that will tell you, here's what you need. You will need to download Drupal. Maybe you need to run download one of the Docker container management. Here's where you're going to get the database from. Here's how you're going to compile the themes. There's a whole process that needs to happen in order for me to be able to work on a project. Security is more edge cases, but when I work on a project, as long as the project is on my machine, now if anything happened to my computer, the project is right there. So Gitpod being a cloud service means that my machine doesn't mean much because no one can access something that is on the cloud. And then we have troubleshooting, where we want to replicate a specific scenario. So it might be a specific way that my local database is running on my Drupal site, and clicking on something or taking certain steps. Maybe I'm not even sure yet how to replicate it, but right now I can see the bug. I cannot give that situation to someone else to look into. I'll have to figure out what happened, replicate the steps, and only then I'll be able to do it. So for Gitpod, no computer is needed. And if you have iPad or your phone, which I find myself often do, that's all you need to get a full Drupal development environment. And I'm using Drupal as an example because I think many projects have a much simpler setup. If you work on JavaScript projects, for example, you don't need so much. But often for setting up a Drupal project, there's a bunch of things that need to happen together. And you usually need a good machine for that if you want to work on normal pace. But here with this service, you don't need a computer. It could be a Chromebook. It could be an iPad or a phone, whatever you're comfortable with. The main, I think, one of the main breakthroughs that Gitpod brings was Docker in Docker. And that's the ability to, if you're familiar with Lando or Docker, Lando or ddev or Doxel, these are different solutions that would help you manage Docker, which help with different things we spoke about in the slides before. And now that you have that in containers, it is easy to bring the same setup somewhere else to another computer. What Gitpod allows us to do is Gitpod gives you a machine that is already in Docker. And what you can do there is you can bring there another Docker. So I'll show you soon. What does it mean? How does it work? And why does it matter? Okay, I see a question about same with Lando, Doxel, etc. Actually, I just did a testing with Doxel. It seems like Doxel has specific DNS requirements, and it became like a problem. Lando, maybe. I do know Lando has some kind of specific requirements of Docker versions, so I'm not so sure. The system I will show you is using also ddev, and we'll talk about why, if we have Gitpod, why do we need ddev? Another benefit we get with Gitpod is you can have whatever ID you like using. So think about having an iPad or a tablet. You get to use VS Code if you like that. You can use PHP Storm. Many Drupal developers like that. You can use Vim or any other ID you can think of would work on the cloud in your browser. So when we work with Gitpod, which is our development environment in a cloud, there is no more this works on my machine, because now it is literally the same setup for any developer that comes on the project. We don't, because Gitpod brought a concept called pre-builds. And the idea there is that you manage your container, your environment, in a configuration file in the repo of your project. And every time you're setting up a new PR or you're creating a new branch, Gitpod in the background already compiling everything that's need to be compiled, downloading Docker images, preparing everything you need. The next developer that needs to work on it, and it could be yourself, you click on a link, it opens up, usually less than a minute, everything is running. PR reviews while working on a ticket, I can open multiple Gitpod workspaces. Each branch gets its own workspace. Gitpod's recommendation is actually using their workspaces as something that you dump as soon as you finish working on. You want to work on a new branch, just open a new workspace, throw the other one. By the way, they stay for 2 weeks and then they're being deleted unless you pin them, and they will stay for as long as you need them. So I can work on a ticket on a branch. I can do PR reviews, which I've done a lot lately, while I'm working on my stuff, because I don't need to change anything. Imagine it's like I have 4 other machines. I just go there, which is still in my browser, and do whatever I need to do right there. Like I said, there's no more README, no more long. This is how you set it up. It's the link that you have, which I'll share with you soon, of what we're going to explore. is all that is required, and the whole environment is being set up for you. The security part, there's no files on a machine. Everything stays in the cloud. And for troubleshooting a specific scenario, they have an interesting feature called Share a Snapshot. So when I click on that, it will take all the files, the database, everything that's specific to that workspace and package it in one file. A link again. I can share that link with anyone. They'll open it and they'll have the exact same machine in the exact same state. So I don't need to figure out yet how to replicate what just happened. Someone else can come and see the actual scenario. Additional benefits. So working with Gitpod doesn't mean you have to let go of your computer. You can still work with your computer and work on other projects at the same time or the same project. When we want to bring a project that we worked on to clients, until today, we have to teach them how to use Doxel or ddev or all the different things that are related to how the developers of that client would set up an environment. And here, yeah, you use these links and it just works. Gitpod would work with GitHub repositories, GitLab, and Bitbucket. It is very simple to set up, as you're going to see. I'm going to show you what it is made up of. If you work with Node or JavaScript project, there's really no setup. It's already there. Gitpod itself, a few months ago, maybe almost a year, announced that they became open source. So you can see all the magic and how it happens. You can use it system as a service. You can also host your own. They'll explain to you, here's the instructions, how to bring it to whatever environment, hosting that you would like. They support multiple things like Azure and Google Cloud, and Gitpod themselves are working on, like their paid service is on Google Cloud. For open source projects, you get up to 50 hours a month for free to work on any open source project. And if you tell them you do open source professionally, they have like a list of a few things. Basically, if you do a lot of it or help Drupal and stuff, you'll get unlimited access to public repository. This happened just a month ago. So they created the DevX conference, which is all about the developer experience. And it was very nice and interesting. Their biggest competitor, you might have heard, is GitHub. GitHub has in beta right now a project called Codespaces. And Codespaces does something very, very similar to what Gitpod is doing. As far as I heard, they decided to delay when they're coming out with it. During beta, whoever has access to the GitHub service, they can only have 2 repositories running, no more. As you'll see in Gitpod, there's infinite. You can do whatever you want. No limitation whatsoever. And other benefits that GitHub did not add yet. I'm reading a question in the chat. Did it locally? Great question. Thank you for asking that. So the question is, so let's say we do have a Gitpod snapshot. Can we bring it to ddev locally? Maybe we need to take a flight or something, and I want to work like that. So the answer is yes. This is exactly why I brought ddev into the Gitpod mixture, allowing us to work with the exact same project on Gitpod or locally, sharing database and doing everything I want to do without limiting or choosing in advance how I want to do that. If you want to join more conversations about it, have deeper questions beyond what we will be able to cover today, please join us at ddev-gitpod channel on Drupal Slack. And that's where we work on also what's next for ddev-gitpod, what other features we would like to add. The main thing I'm trying to push for is to allow any Drupal contributor to click one link on Drupal.org, getting Gitpod working because it's free for open source projects, doing whatever they need, push the code back, and no more required to install things on your local machine and figure out what you need to do to get the Drupal setup. So if someone want to contribute fixing spelling mistake, writing documentation in code, even that becomes so much easier because the whole setup is happening with a link. So we can talk about that more as well. And if you're ready, you can either look at my screen, what I'm doing, or you can go here. Let me try copying this to the chat. So everyone's will have it. So this is the initial repository where I'm running all my tests. There's another question in the chat. Can we use it for testing new branches that are generated in issues? Irena, is that a question about Drupal? Assuming it is,
yes.
Then
yes, okay. I'll find the link for the issue that we're trying to test, and it takes forever. I mean, that's not true. It's not takes forever to set it locally. It is much quicker if you can do it remotely. I'll put link in the chat in a second. Sorry.
Okay, and I can show you what's possible. There's even a few things that you will see that, in my opinion, would start be parallel to what you can do with Simply Test Me, because in Simply Test Me, you get to choose the project, the issues, the patches you want to see. It does its magic, and after a few minutes, you have a website ready. Here, we probably would be able to get to a similar setup that would give you the website to see, but also allow you right away to develop that code. In the Drupal contribution part, the working part is no problem to take a branch and test it. Actually, we can even start using that probably right now. The issues we have now is authorizing it to push code back. That's the part that is a little bit tricky, but we're working on it together with Drupal Association and Gitpod, and we'll figure it out. So if you go to github.com/shal/ddev-gitpod, you'll see my project right here. We collected 33 stars, going strong soon. And yeah, so there's another question. They mentioned the website powered by VS Code. Something about that you'll see very soon. Yeah, we're going to cover that. So here you'll see a demo that's very quickly going to show you what I'm going to show you. The README also explain how to test it out. So if you forgot what we said here, you can follow step by step. It's very simple. It's really all about clicking that link and everything going to happen after that. And what we're going to cover and what says in the README as well is how you can choose different IDEs. VS Code is one of them, or the main one, but you can definitely use others. And this is the explanation of how the magic happened. We can go to it soon. Randy Fay is the guy that created ddev, helped me a ton with figuring out edge cases and solving things and getting to the amazing place where we're at today. And we also talk about some future ideas and things that we would like to do. So one more thing, I personally installed an extension of Gitpod that if you see my green Gitpod button here, it all because of that extension. So that extension would add to any GitHub repo that you look at, would add that button. That button basically add what you'll see in this link. Before the repo URL, it's adding gitpod.io/pound and then the URL. That would allow you to open any existing repository. Works as well in GitLab and in Bitbucket. So without further ado, here we go. So I'm clicking on it. It tells me I have one open. I said, it's okay, I want a new one. And now what it does is it's taking the images that, as I explained before, were compiled through the pre-build. And all what Gitpod is doing now is it bringing the environment that I set up. This one specifically is a Drupal 9 before installation website that we're going to see here with an extra script that would help you run with one command PHP storm. So you can look at that. Even Xdebug works out of the box. So you'll see how easy that is to, as it's great with live demos, hopefully it's going to work this time. But it should be that we're going to set a breakpoint, turn on Xdebug, and you'll see that it just worked. I know that many times Xdebug takes some time to get working in projects. So usually in less than a minute, we're getting the container image pulled. You'll see this little G jumping here. And once this part finishes, you will see a layout that looks very, very much like VS Code. It is VS Code. So the main interface that you would see right now is using I think it's called the VS Code remote code, which on the left, I'll see the list of files I have. The main part here is where the files are being opened. At the bottom, I have a terminal. And you see what you see here now is Drupal being ready to install. Updated yesterday to 9.19. Down here, if you're familiar with ddev, and I'll explain where the Gitpod part is and where's the ddev part. Gitpod is a Linux machine, actually a very powerful, with lots of memory. In their website, you can see of how powerful and how much memory you get. But these are really fast machines running directly on Google Cloud. So running Composer here is very fast. Running anything is fast. And Gitpod would allow you to install things just like on any Linux machine. It would have a file called gitpod.yaml, which we can go through later, that explains the structure of my environment, my setup. It also have a base image, which is different things that we would like to install ahead of time. But if we compare this project to a Magento 2 project that I've seen on Gitpod, the Magento 2 project has a Docker file of between, I think it's 1,500 lines that explain all the different pieces of the MySQL and everything that needs to be done in order to get a Magento 2, the kind of similar setup to Drupal that you would need if you just set it up through Dockerfile. By bringing ddev into the picture, which is similar to what you're familiar with in Lando and everything, just ddev works really well and super flexible. This is my setup. So in this setup, I can rename it, choose ports, do everything I need, bring Solar, work with Xdebug and everything. And then I get the ddev terminal commands in the CLI to do whatever I need. So one of the things I could do is, I don't know if the font is big enough. I'll make it a little bigger right here. And I'm going to run ddev drush system install or site install. I think that should be the command. Okay, so ddev drush site install demo Umami with yes. So what drush does now, because the database is set up and everything, it's installing the demo Umami demo. You'll see that it's pretty quick. I think it's about 40 seconds here. I don't know how it is on your machine. Usually Macs would have a little bit of an issue when working with the file system and Docker. Here on Linux, that speed limit does not exist. It just ran so fast. I'll increase the chat window so I can see if there's more questions I can answer for now. Okay. Okay, great. No questions. So Gitpod or ddev say that the work is finished. Here we have a preview browser right there. I'm gonna hit refresh, and what you see here is the Umami website. Woo-hoo. So I have a full Drupal website installed, while whatever I'm doing here is actually updating the website. One of the things we're gonna try, crossing fingers that this will actually work, is index PHP. Thank you. So we'll do this. First of all, I'm going to ask ddev to turn on xdebug. That part worked. Now I'm going to put a breakpoint, and I'm going to, in VS Code, I'm going to click on listen to xdebug. Now I'm going to go to the browser. Let's do this public. In the browser, I'm going to go to any page, like view recipe. And look at that xdebug working with 0 setup. So xdebug stopped where I put the breakpoint, and I put it in index.php, so it's easy to see and everything. And you get everything you get from xdebug, everything you need to know about that process, whatever you would like to debug. If you're familiar with VS Code, you have everything right here. By the way, a project can also have its own extensions that you would like to add to a project. But as a user, Gitpod is tracking my extensions. So whatever extensions I like to use in VS Code would go with me between projects. At the same time, each project can decide to add their own extensions. And if you're familiar with VS Code extensions, they are incredible. Okay, going to the next part that I would like to show you is, I want this one is, you will see, there's a preview here. Stop the xdebug for now. Okay. And you will see that if you like PHP Storm, in the terminal, you can run .ddev run PHP Storm. So I'll put this command in. So this is using a system that PHP Storm came up with. It is called Projector, I think with a K. And that's what it does. So my Gitpod window stays here in VS Code. In the meantime, PHP Storm runs remotely, again, reminding you, this is in the browser. So using my browser, I'm going to see my whole project. Okay, continue. So whoever is more comfortable working with PHP Storm, because it's a Drupal project, there you go. The latest PHP Storm is right here. All the commands that you're familiar with are still here. So all the benefits that you would have there, including xdebug as well, working here out of the box. So these are the main advantages. We can also talk a little bit about, I have another project. This is their website, by the way. Did a rebranding recently, explaining why is it important, what does it do. If you want to see what their pricing is, again, as mentioned, open source get for free. If you say you're professional open source, it becomes unlimited and not only 50 hours. Then they have these other services. They would also explain to you how to do self-hosted and what can be done. They also have students pricing. So that's their website. If you would look on for someone that already logged in like me. So all you need usually when you go to Gitpod, if you try the link, it will first ask you to give them some access through GitLab or GitHub, whatever you have. So if I'll go to Gitpod.io workspaces, you'll see different workspaces I'm working on. If you look at the all, you see a very, very long list of all these workspaces are things I used. I dumped because I did not use them anymore. But if I all of a sudden need them, I just click on them and they would work. So all these workspaces staying here for 14 days. This one that I pinned would stay here forever until I stop that. And I wanted to show you an example of, this is a JavaScript project using Vite, the latest Lit 2, together with SAS. By clicking on Gitpod here, Gitpod would work. You would see that the Node project, their image loads way faster. I'm checking with Gitpod, why can we get that speed also for the Drupal one? And by running this, you'll see that running node commands and everything super fast. You get the preview, whatever ports you need, usually if it's 6006 for Storybook, or 3000 or 5000 for different node projects, it would just work. So this one would already have the compile of the yarn, so you don't need to wait for that. That's what I spoke about, the pre-builds feature. And then right away, it's opening Storybook for us. So we can preview either here, or if I go to the port list, I can open it as its own browser. These links, by the way, because I opened them, I could just give you as an example. Although it's not going to work for long. Maybe I'll give you the Drupal one that's going to stay for a little longer. It's this one here. So the way their URL set is the port dash the funny name they give it .gitpod.io. Every project, when you open it, gets its own 2 words name plus some random letters, numbers, stuff. But this workspace, like if you'll try to go to this address, you won't be able to. Only because I opened the port, you can view the port just like I do, like the end result of my project. I could, highly not recommending it, I could actually share my workspace right now where it is, because it used to be there. And then share my workspace means that you can actually go into my machine and do everything there. Share workspace snapshot is what I told you, that whatever state my machine is in, which that I can actually share with you now, now it's creating that special link, which means now it's going to be already with Umami of Drupal installed in the database. And the link that I have here, if I share it, you can open it and you'll open your own machine in the same exact state that my machine is without interfering with my machine. So that's how the idea of the snapshot is working. One of the things I'm trying to find solution for, would love to get ideas, opinions. Here, the URL that I can share with you if you want to try. How does a snapshot look like? But I see a question, can we run Gitpod locally on our laptop desktop? In theory, yes, because Gitpod needs Docker environment. So, but it's complex and I would not recommend it. Otherwise, just like as a program, it's not going to really work. But any Docker environment that you have, Gitpod could be installed in. And how easy it is to upload project I'm working on into Gitpod or download Gitpod project into local ddev. So the switch between, so this project, as you saw it in GitHub, Shaal ddev-gitpod is, let's open it here again. So this is a repository. This one specifically is public. The same would go with private. Because I have .ddev here, this is a normal, regular ddev setup. There's nothing special here. What we did to make it also work the same way in Gitpod is gitpod YAML, .gitpod.yaml, which is the setup of Gitpod, is where you can tell it how to behave and what to do. The pre-build process I told you about, that's what it does. So every time I'm going to create a new PR, open a new branch or anything, that's when pre-build is going to run. Pre-build would create the Gitpod setup ddev, which means it will download all the ddev Docker image, all the Docker images that ddev is using. It would already run for me Composer install. Command is each time any of us gonna open that workspace, these are the commands that would work. That's why once the G stopped jumping there and you saw the VS Code, in a few seconds, ddev is already running because all the Docker images are already there. And Composer install, just checking if anything changed since last time, because it's also running. And then here, it's making sure that when port 8080, which we had to change from 80 because Gitpod is protecting all ports under 1024, that it will open the internal preview on that port. This is where we're listing the ports of, I'm telling Gitpod in advance, I know we will need these ports because of different things that we need, like port 999 for Xdebug. 8080 is the main one. I believe 8025 was for PHP My Admin. 8026 or 8036, one of them is for Mailhog. This is set up for now. I copy paste on all of them that talks about when to create pre-builds, and I put true on everything because why not? Which means every time there's a new PR, it goes ahead and do that. By the way, even we made ddev, which you can do with any project you want, Gitpod compatible. So now ddev development also happen in Gitpod. So if you're familiar with ddev or project in the scale of ddev, ddev is written in the language Go. And these are the tasks of what needs to happen to create the whole ddev setup. So if someone wants to contribute to ddev, until now you had to create your own environment with Golang and everything that needs to be installed right there. And now we can just click on a link. What you see on the screen right now is when I think ddev Gitpod recently upgraded something. There's two parts of a pre-build. Building image is when the setup of your machine, the Docker file, the main Docker file changed. So it will run once, and until that Docker file change, or if Gitpod makes updates, which happen only every few months, this part will run. When you make changes in your .gitpod.yaml file, that's where the pre-build going to run, which means it will compile it, run Composer, whatever it is that you need. So most people, when they click on a link, they'll just get to the system that is ready. I see a question here. Does the free version only work with public repos? I believe it is. I think that's how it is set up, that the free one is for public repos only, and the payment is giving you access to the private ones. I also think that right now the $9 give you 100 hours for anything, public or private. And the other thing, maybe it's 20 or something like that, gives you unlimited. They told me they are planning to make pricing changes to make it more affordable and more specific to how much you would like to use it. So what we have here that you see, again, look the same. This is a VS Code. It's the theme that I like. It comes with my extensions. Now I have the ddev development environment. So it's not, you could run a Drupal site here as well, but this whole thing now is for ddev development, which is amazing. So any project out there doesn't have to be Drupal, just Drupal as an example of something that is more complex to set up. Now, for people who want to contribute to ddev using Golang, there's one link to click on, and this whole setup comes up, which is fascinating. What would be my steps to use the test? One of Drupal issue forks. Okay, let's try that. I don't know. I'm going to try it. So the question is, let's say we have Drupal issue forks and we want to test it out. So as far as I remember, this should work. We'll figure that out right here. The issue I knew about was that we couldn't push back code, but if it's just for testing, I believe we would be able to do it. So let's see how we're going to do it. We're going to go to the actual fork, which is right here. So this is, and the reason why we have still issues with pushing code back is because Drupal is using a self-hosted version of GitLab and not GitLab itself. GitLab itself, by the way, is officially having Gitpod as in, sorry, GitLab, when you have this edits with ID, maybe I can just show you an example. Yeah, let's go to a project. Would give you basically, you have an option to edit things directly with Gitpod. So, and I think it's gonna be more into, okay, something here. So you see this web IDE, when you go to your preferences, you can ask instead of having this, which is weird for me why I don't see it here, edit with Gitpod instead. So that's what I want to show you here. So here I clicked on the fork of the issue of Drupal. And now I would see here, clone with SSH or clone with HTTPS. And what I want to show you, so there's another project I'm working on. For now, I call it my Gitpod because I'm still figuring it out. What this one does is it's a similar, okay. One more thing about free accounts. You can only open 4 workspaces at the same time. So if you don't need one, I'm just going to stop it. And this is the one that I like. This is the one I don't need anymore. So now I have 3 available ones. Great. Now this should work again. Okay, I'll wait for them to finish stopping the systems. That should take, usually this would happen just in a few seconds. And when you stop a workspace, that database and all the codes stay there. Like I mentioned, 14 days. So all these workspaces are waiting with the same database in the exact spot that you stopped it. They don't go anywhere. If you pin them, they'll stay forever beyond the 14 days. If you don't touch your computer and you have Gitpod open, it will take half an hour until it's shutting down. If it sees that you didn't make any movement in the VS Code. And if you decided to close it, it will close with 3 minutes. But again, this is not a destructive close. It's just, imagine it's hibernating or something. Okay, so now that I have workspaces available, yeah, they definitely change one of the images. So this one is my Gitpod. So if before I showed you this system, which is specific Drupal site, my Gitpod is my try to not have a specific site, but have an environment very similar to this one, still using ddev, that would allow you to work on any other project. But I could still also take this one, create here projects. This is theory. I hope it works. So under project here, I'll do git clone of that fork. I also want to do, yeah, it's better to use the other one because it has a better between ddev and stop. Yeah. We don't only work with example project. I don't know what pure demo mode is.
I have a good question. You're logging in with your, so you're logging into Gitpod with your whatever account, not with your Drupal account, right?
I had a hard time to hear what you said.
I'll put it in chat.
Oh, now I could actually hear you really well. Yeah, so I connect to Gitpod with my GitHub. That's my user in Gitpod is actually a GitHub user. That's how they identify me. I believe that to just clone things from Drupal, you don't need any, again, the pushing going to be where we will need that special thing that we're working on. But I believe that to clone it, any anonymous user could clone it. Okay, so here finally, I get my Gitpod, very similar environment with a terminal here. By the way, you can also open multiple terminals, and I'll run projects here and I'll do git clone to that URL that we had over here. So now on the projects, I would have the actual Drupal project. Is that true? Or, oh, this is a, okay. So this is a Drupal module, right? It's not like the Drupal core. Is that correct?
Yep,
okay.
This is modules. I was wondering if it's possible to use some kind of setup. So I would add module
for a
to
module, I believe it should be way simpler for me to do that because now I have demo Umami, for example, installed. And I could do putting contrib under modules. I could clone this specific project right here. If I'll go to my Umami website, I do not know what's my admin. Something was running here. Okay, ddev-brush ULI. Okay, so I'm going to get my one-time login. And you should ignore this because this is not a regular ddev URL, but otherwise it does work like ddev. So I'm going to go, now I'm an admin. I'm assuming that if I'll go to extend now, is this the module? No. Oh yes. Is it feeds? I don't know even what did I
Well,
clone
this
now?
is one of the issues. So I think that answers my question in general, because you run the demo and I understand how it works. So I would need to have both.
Both what?
So thank you. Well, I would need to have Drupal somewhere and then add this patch
Yeah.
to.
So one, right. So this my Gitpod experiment I'm doing, the idea would be that in the hopefully near future,
Good.
when you're going to look at something like this, you will have a link
Yeah.
that takes you to Gitpod, to a Drupal environment that's ready for you, and will clone the project or the thing you're trying to test right into the place. So like the few steps that I took
That
in,
would be cool.
that one link would know how to do that for you. But yeah, you could totally use, so for testing different modules and things like that, you can use ddev-gitpod as is, bring whatever you need using Composer or Git clone into your project, and then it should be part of what you see here. So you have, again, this is a full development environment. There's nothing, as far as I know, that you could do in a local machine that you cannot do through Gitpod.
This is very cool. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Yeah.
I might need to have to leave the meeting early, so I just wanted to, ask my question, get wonderful answer, and say thank you.
Sure, and feel free to join the ddev-gitpod on Drupal Slack, because that's where we can take things, find ideas of what we can do better and make more magic out of things, and that would help us and help the whole community to. That's my dream, that anybody that want to contribute or test things, which is a huge part of our contribution, would just like we have create a fork as a button now, we would have click here, get into Gitpod, test what you need, and let us know.
Thank you so much. I already joined the Slack. I'm with my mom in the doctor's office, but I really didn't want to miss it, so I'll reach out to you on Slack. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, so that's where we're at with things in Drupal forks and all that. The main thing I'm trying to find, or the next thing that I want to find now, is working on a project with a database. I want to find a way to quickly, so many times when I work on a Drupal project, I got to a certain state, I added some content to my database. Now I'll move to a new branch or go to the next feature. I would like to back up what I have and then open it in this new workspace. So that's the next thing that I'm working on. Where is that thing where we store the current database so we can load it later on, which again, in this system work very, very fast anyway. Can you share content and or many to help with testing? Andrew, can you explain? I'm not sure I understand the question.
I think you actually just are going exactly where I want to go. Is if I set up some elaborate menuing system to test something, like how do I take that snapshot and then share it with somebody? Like I help out with the mega menu system, and it takes a lot to set up like 3 different levels of menuing to even start testing something. So if I could set up a menuing with parent-child relationships and then say,
so I'll show you a quick what I got so far. You can see my terminal, right? What I'm doing there at the bottom here, the terminal that is inside Gitpod. So ddev has an amazing command called Snapshot also, I believe. Is that how it is? Yes, I think it is. Okay, so ddev snapshot, and I think it works as is. What's amazing about ddev snapshot, it creates really big files, but super fast. Did you see that? So usually when you need to, I mean, this is just demo Umami, but it is a database. When you use Drush to bring a database, it takes time. The ddev snapshot and snapshot restore works so fast. So my plan in general, I believe it is sitting in ddev under, it's going to be here somewhere. DB snapshots. That's where it is. Okay, so now I have this file, this directory still. So my plan is to be able to send that to S3 storage, something that's going to be very cheap anyway. And all we will do is save files, load files. And if I give this file as to someone and they would use ddev restore snapshot, they'll have that exact database to work with. So that's one way. Another way you could do is you can work on your project, let's say on ddev-gitpod, that one, create here with demo Umami or regular standard Drupal, whatever you need to create that thing you want. If you click on the menu here and do share workspace snapshot, that's already like the whole Gitpod. So I shared a link above. It gives you a Gitpod link. Anybody that clicks on it going to get that snapshot, which means it will get all the files, that ddev, the database, everything you created will be right there. You don't need to do anything manual. So if you're okay with a system that you set up or a file or the repository that you work with, use share workspace snapshot would be a perfect solution, because anybody now can take it, add to it. Maybe then you'll have new snapshots after that. So that's a built-in Gitpod feature. Can you set up SSH keys for share? Well, yes. I mean, that's share snapshot. Is that connected to the question, the SSH keys and share snapshot?
Yes, it is. I was just saying, like, if you're going to share the workspace snapshot, you want it to be secure, like, and the person you're sharing it with, you should they should give you your public key and stuff like that. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. We can ask Gitpod as well about
Because
that
if
option. I
anybody
didn't
gets
think about
access
it.
to that link,
Yeah,
they
all of
can
a sudden
form it.
it's yeah, but it's very possible. I didn't check that Gitpod would be able to open that snapshot only because it's based on a repo that the other person also have access. And right now we're just using public repositories, so we can't really see when it's not going to work. Does that make sense? But I believe that's how it works. So that's how it creates that security of anybody that can access to the repo that your snapshot is built on would be able to open it. But that's just my
Yeah.
guess.
Security through obscurity, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, for the Drupal, I'm almost sure I didn't just go deep enough to test it, that we could, this is, again, this is, where are we? A Linux machine. Like, you can create SSH keys, you can do everything here, and this can be your machine. One of the ideas behind the MyGitPod repository is, what if people want, instead of keep throwing branches, throwing workspaces, keep that as a machine and keep bringing into this repo other projects. So this repo stays clean because it's not including any specific repositories, but you keep going to that same workspace where you have all these different setups already ready for you. But again, it's more concept in theory in the making. How easy would it be to deploy a site from here to AWS Lightsail or DigitalOcean? Salim, it would be as easy as it is from any other computer in the world. Does that make sense? Like, if these systems have any kind of deploy command, it would work the same way. So this Linux machine here that I'm running doesn't know it's Gitpod in a way. It does, but it doesn't. Like it's a Linux machine. Whatever you could do on others, you could. The biggest benefit, or I think one of the big things they were able early on in the game to solve is the ability to, so I love the software Git Kraken. It helps you do a lot of things with Git using a UI. And then recently I found Git Ui, but that's not a good idea because I can show you. Basically, all I want to say is you can run sudo commands. You can run root. And many times the problem with running root is you might have access to other Dockers on the same Google Cloud. And so you have root, but without any issues with accessing anything that's beyond your workspace. So that's the huge benefit that we have here. But we could run brew commands. We can run sudo update, sudo up install, anything we want to do. What does that do? Sysbench view.
Oh, it's just a benchmark tool.
Oh,
Wanted to see
okay.
how fast it was.
Do you want me to run it?
Well, I just ran it, and
Oh, how was
yeah.
it?
You know, I don't know if it's appropriate to run it on two different machines because my MacBook Pro right now, which is not a super high-end one, did much better than this one. But I'm seeing how fast this is, so something isn't jiving, and I suspect it's more the problem with the benchmark than Gitpod.
Yeah. So my experience, I'm using MacBook Pro for work. This machine is way faster, and I have like a newer-ish MacBook Pro. Working there on Drupal projects, way faster. You know, like compiling Node, all these things. Like slowness is definitely not the problem of these machines. So I'm really enjoying that.
Well, actually, I use a GUI for my for working with Git. I know Git Kraken, but I use Git Tower. They're really both good tools. So wait, what are you doing on Gitpod to replace all those wonderful GUI tools?
So I found recently, recently as yesterday, there was Git Ui and Lazy Git. So this is Git Ui that basically give you UI in the terminal. And
Okay, so we do just have to find CLI equivalents for everything.
well, yes and no, because that's what I showed with, I stopped the PHP Storm, but there's a whole VNC way to connect different programs instead of being limited to VS Code. Or in addition to that, Gitpod is actively working now on making PHP Storm as available as VS Code is. So if right now I need to go to like a new window for PHP Storm, it will be almost like you choose, if I'll go to Gitpod, what's my profile? Let's go to the site and see my profile. Where is it? Settings. So here you would see preferences. I like the dark one. Okay, so they do have Thea and VS Code. Thea is a VS Code open source version. VS Code is easier or better for most people, so they switch to it. So their planning is to bring more of these other UI tools to be working on the machine as well.
That's cool. Yeah. I'm a fan of PHP Storm. Nothing against VS Storm. It's just VS Code. I just started with PHP Storm though.
Yeah, so it's really amazing too. I mean, before I was worried about PHP Storm because a lot of people that like Drupal, by limiting them only to VS Code would be a problem. But with one command, we can just run PHP Storm with everything that it brings. It's incredible. And yeah, Thea is built by Eclipse. And I do think they kind of share, it looks super similar. I think they share code with VS Code. Yeah, and GitLens is the best. I love GitLens. I think I have it here also. No GitLens? Okay, I usually love Git Lens. Whoever did not try it yet on a project, it's awesome. Actually, I do have, because it allows me to do this thing. So Git Lens is kind of getting you drive through history of each file and see the specific of what changed when, and you can just go backwards and more backwards and see what happened before and before. I really like it. Here in the README of that repository, I go to more details of how it was set up. What does this file do? Gitpod YAML. What does Gitpod Docker file do? How do we use ddev itself to do the commands? And how do we get a Drupal website running, Mailhog service running, and PHPMyAdmin running, including setting up this, which is something specific for, because they're not using Docker 20 yet. There's this issue with the Xdebug. Yeah, it's Docker 19. You could, by the way, just install, but I'm not sure. Probably making that up. Yeah. So I think in theory, I could just install right here Docker 20 instead of the Docker 19. So it's amazing the things that you can do and the setup you can get to. Whatever it is that you like about your system, put it in the Gitpod YAML setup with the Docker file of everything that you would like to install in this Linux machine before, which is here I'm updating all the system. Here we're adding all this projector PHP Storm stuff. And I think, yeah, we're creating that command. Here we're installing ddev originally. And so that's what's setting up and preparing everything. Okay, something did not work. But before that, I was able to install this. But you can install any Linux package that is out there. You could run the commands to install them. The big thing to get used to is the URL, because you used to maybe a site.ddev.site, and instead you would have here a random name dash random numbers and letter .gitpod.io. And each time you're going to open a new workspace, not the same workspace. So if this workspace went to sleep and you woke it up after 10 days, it will keep the same name. If you open a new one, you will need to find the new one. I can show you in here. We have a file. We do some magic. So this is the script that we added to make ddev work the same in Gitpod. And what we're doing here is we're getting the current workspace URL and make ddev understand how to work with that. And that's my demo for today.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, so I can see how it doesn't actually get rid of the need to buy a laptop, because obviously you still have to connect to the internet.
Or a tablet.
Or a tablet, that's true. But it does mean that maybe the role of the laptop diminishes. It's maybe we all have other tools that we need, whether we need to edit photos or whatever. We obviously have our mail we have to check. But all of a sudden, you just kind of need a big screen, and it doesn't have to be very powerful. It doesn't have to have a lot of RAM if all the main development work is being done in the cloud.
Well, can take it another level. I have Quest 2, which I really like and I highly recommend. It's a VR headset. So I can use my virtual reality headset to open a browser in the virtual reality headset and to code with a virtual keyboard just using VR headset. I don't need a laptop. And that was also a big thing that came up in the DevX conference, how more and more of these things that takes time and developers need to wait and all that, and how long does it take to bring someone up to speed? Okay, now we have a link to get someone up to speed. And yeah, if before I need to have a very powerful Mac to do the work I do, but having Gitpod, I don't.
Yeah.
And having this ddev-gitpod combination, I can choose if today I run it locally or today I run it in the cloud.
Well, right now, what I did maybe a year and a bit ago is I bought the MacBook Pro 13-inch because I had to buy, the old laptop had died, and I knew that there was a 32 gigabyte one coming. And then when the 32 gigabyte one came, Apple released its M1 chips, and I realized, well, wait a minute, maybe I just want to wait until the MacBook Pro 16 M1 comes around. So I'm in limbo using a machine that's not powerful enough. I'm suffering. So I might just try doing some of my harder work through Gitpod. It might solve my problem.
I would love to hear about your experiences. I would also love to help you set up things or understand how to set up your project. The reason I put together this README here somewhere, the main part, is so people would know, you can repeat that on any repository. This is like the special sauce to get ddev working in Gitpod. And it's not difficult. There's 4 files and that's it.
That's great. Okay. Well, this setup is already set up with Doxel. So I'm curious how.
So at phase 2, we work with Doxel, which unfortunately I could not make it happy with Gitpod. I ran ddev config, enter all defaults, and it just worked with ddev. So it was amazing that I didn't need to do anything for a Doxel configured project. I just put ddev instead, and it just worked.
Yeah, right.
Ofer, I'd be interested in working with you on that and getting Gitpod working with Doxel.
Oh, let's do it. Absolutely.
Okay, let's do it.
Who is that, Sean?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was just gonna say, you should work with Sean to do this, because Doxel's really awesome, so.
I had real trouble hearing that.
He was basically saying I'm one of the maintainers, so he should work with me.
Oh, of Doxel.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Oh.
Yeah,
Ofer,
I'll be happy to.
Ofer, I have a question. I'm sorry if you repeated this. I was away for a little bit, but I was able to replicate what you did using your link, and it created a workspace. But when I create a new workspace, it's using your project as a scaffolding. What if I create my own? I want to create a brand new my GitHub branch. I don't want to use yours. Is that the 3 files you were talking about? Like, how does that work?
So if you'll go, so I'm trying to post and publish more of everything I'm able to do and achieve here in the ddev-gitpod repo.
Right.
So the file that you would need is copy the Gitpod YAML as is, copy the Gitpod Docker file as is,
I see.
the ddev config as is, and this. So these 4 files in your machine would create it. You probably want to change the config to a different name. I think we just call it like a Drupal 9 or ddev-gitpod, but you can choose whatever name you want here. It doesn't really matter. Having these 4 files on any repo would make that project run Drupal site.
Awesome. So that's all I need. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
In the new upcoming My Gitpod, that again, it's in the making. It's a similar idea, but more about it doesn't come with a project by itself, but it's kind of an initial setup. It would be able to allow you to work on things. But yeah, if you want it, so when you have a project that you want to put ddev-gitpod on, these would be the 4 files that you should install. By having them, you'll have all the automation, the pre-builds, everything happening. You just need to create branches, create PR, move your project moving forward.
Okay, thank you very much. That helped very much. And I like your presentation. This is a new way of thinking. I always struggle with like virtual boxes and stuff like that. Even Lando I'm getting used to, but this is without troubleshooting too much, you can get down to your work right away.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I really think this is where it's going because there's so many things that it takes care of.
Really good job, Ofer. You've come a long way on this. I know you've been working on this for a long, long time. Good job, man.
Thank you. Yeah, it started as a crazy idea, but it became like, oh, it works. Okay.
So do you remember where it got stuck with the Doxel?
Yeah, Doxel has, I even had, what did I have a, basically with Doxel, I had to tell it to use the different ports. I think that was easy, right? 8080 instead of 80 and all that. I had to put in, there's something with the DNS or tell it, but basically, yeah. I mean, I don't know if you want to keep recording it, if you want to stop, if Sean want to share a screen, or if you want to work on it at a different time, whatever works.
Yeah, no, I can't do it right now, but I'm going to, I guess, just, I think for me to be useful, I need to just have some time inside of Gitpod and play around with it so I know my way around it. And then I'll try some things. So how did you say we can get in touch with you? On Slack, you said, I
The
think?
easiest, so I have, yeah, Shaal for a Gmail, Shaal at phase2technology.com. I'll put it in the chat here if you want.
And then just to go back to the very beginning, it sounded like the goal is to have a click, like a link on Drupal.org, where if someone wanted to work on the project, it would just fire up.
Yeah, definitely. Using these issue forks, we would like to just add one more button that says, or maybe it would be even before you get to this page, on the actual, just like you have this thing of get push access and all these, you'll have a button here. It has all it needs to know. It has the module, it has the version, it knows which Drupal version it works on. We have the setup ready for you. We just put it in less than a minute. You have the whole thing ready to either test or contribute code to.
Oh my God, do you know how amazing that would be? People have had so much trouble contributing to Drupal over the years.
Yeah, I mean, I said if anybody's seen Dries' representation,
Oh,
it
that was,
only talk about finding where to start your contribution, not about actually trying to contribute. And because I think that's a huge undertaking, and it's amazing if we can fix it so easily.
yeah, that would be great. Yeah, thanks for this presentation. It's really great.
Sure, thank you so much for coming. And yeah, the next place I'm going to present it would be in, I forgot. Amy June, you mentioned that a conference coming soon. Dev.
Decoupled days.
Yes, I think that's the one. Thank you.
And so these folks are what, Series A funding or a little bit further along, or what do you think?
Well, a month ago they got $14 million, which they